Welcome to the Business Brain Food Podcast, the show business owners listen to when they want to take their business to the next level. Head to businessbrainfood.com.au to catch up on past episodes and access show notes from every episode. Now, here's your host, Ben Futrell.
Well, welcome back to the Business Brain Food Podcast. This, my friend, is the podcast that is 100% devoted to taking you and your business to the next level. And the good news is, doesn't matter whether you're just brand new to this business thing, so maybe you're just scratching that entrepreneurial itch, or maybe you're like myself and you've been in business for a long, long time and you've got the scars and the wounds to prove it. No matter what, there's always something new we can do to take our business to the next level. And today is going to be absolutely no different. Really, really looking forward to having a chat with Todd Palmer today. More on Todd very, very shortly. Before we get Todd on the show, I wanted to remind you that today's podcast is brought to you by maximumprofit.com.au. The team at Maximum Profit help you build the business you imagine. So if you imagined a business that was a bit more fun to run, maybe it was more profitable, maybe it gave you more time to do the things that you love, like spending time with your family or playing golf or out sailing or doing whatever it is you like. Maybe your business has got you roped right in where you're working so many hours it's ridiculous and you feel burnt out. Well, if it's not the business that you imagine, then you need some help to get it there. Head across to maximumprofit.com.au and find out how the team there can help you build the business you imagined. All right, so Todd Palmer is our guest today. He's a renowned thought leader, CEO, executive coach, and author, and he's really committed to improving lives. And I just love that about Todd. He's such a great guy. As a successful entrepreneur and business owner, he works with both individuals and companies to support corporate growth, faster business startups, and guides leaders in the areas of talent management, workforce planning, and organizational development. Welcome to the Business Brain Food Podcast, Todd.
It's so happy to be here. Thank you for having me on today.
Oh, my absolute pleasure, mate. We can't wait to hear your story. We love hearing from entrepreneurs that have had their own roller coaster ride, and we can learn from them. So let's start there. Tell us about what ignited the spark in your belly to get into business, buddy.
Well, it's crazy. It actually started when I was in grade school, in elementary school here in the United States, and I had my first business in about the 6th grade. I lived in a really small farming town, and we had one store in downtown. And my mom drove me to school, and we drove past the school, and I would stop in there, load up, take my allowance, load up on, 10, 15 cent pieces of candy, go to school, flip them for a quarter or 30 cents. And boom, I was off and running. I identified a demand in the marketplace, hungry kids. I had a supply, my mom driving me to the store, and boom, we put 2 and 2 together. And that got me a trip to the principal's office and told not to do it ever again. So because I'm a defiant entrepreneur, I've now started several businesses since then.
Yeah, isn't that interesting that you got told not to do it again instead of encouraged? I mean, what do you think about that from a school? Like, do you think the schooling system should be encouraging people to be entrepreneurs?
Well, again, this is a little ways back in time. This is like in the mid 1980s. So I'm probably sound a little younger than I am. I think back in those days, it was a matter of small town. Everybody knew each other. Want everybody to go along and get along. And I think the mindset was that I was taking advantage of the other students. Now, I remember we're dealing with people who are in the system of bureaucracy within the school, so they see it a little bit differently. So now, 30 some odd years later, I see it a little bit differently. You can appreciate maybe where they're coming from. They don't want to have chaos in the room. But the flip side of it is, to your point, I think it would have been wise for them to take that mindset and push it towards the creative outlet that a lot of entrepreneurs are seeking when we're young.
Yeah. And did you do well at school? Like, were you really academic, or did you struggle to get good grades at school?
No one's ever asked me that. So I'm happy to tell you the truth. I was a student who tested exceedingly well from a basic standpoint for IQ, things like that. But I was not a very good student. I had a mindset wrapped around that there were classes I was good in, English, writing, creative writing programs like that. And I had a mindset around classes I wasn't good in, such as mathematics. And so I either did really, really well in a subject, or I did really, really poorly in a subject. What that taught me, though, now, again, 30 years later, was that failure, as I saw it, is like, I'm a failure. I can't pass this test. I can't pass this class, was really a great learning opportunity for me for entrepreneurship. Because so many entrepreneurs struggle with the imposter syndrome around failing forward to get into being successful. And we just get wrapped up in trying to figure out, I had this idea and it didn't work. That must be the only thing I can ever do. When the reality is, just like with academics, well, you tried this class, you didn't get a good grade. You can always take a different class. You can always try a different thing. Well, we can iterate through academics. We can also iterate through our businesses, going from one bump to the other, really until we get that momentum of the flywheel to make us a little bit more successful.
And in your family, did you have other entrepreneurs? Like, were your parents entrepreneurial? I mean, it sounds like maybe they had a farm, did they? Or what was it that drove you to go, you know what, I'm gonna buy candy and sell it at double the price?
Well, yeah, it is just like, well, hey, it seemed, as an entrepreneur, like, well, students want it, store has it. A lot of kids don't have the opportunity to drive into school like I do. Boom, I'm gonna fix this demand in the marketplace. It's interesting now looking back. My father, I lost my father when I was 5 years old, and his dream was to always have his own business. And he worked for one of the large automotives here in Metro Detroit, and he never really got the opportunity to do that. And I have an older brother; he's 12 years older than me, and he always tells stories about my dad saying, someday I want to do this and someday I want to do that, when opening his own restaurant, opening his own bar, doing something in the community like that, because he's a big community-minded guy. So he really never got into it, but come to find out that my grandmother actually started one of the very first human capital staffing agencies in Metro Detroit out of her kitchen. And this would have been probably in the 1950s, give or take. So she was an entrepreneur. I never even met the woman, so I'm assuming there's something in the blood. But now, flash forward, I've been an entrepreneur. I've had some. My brother's daughters have been entrepreneurs. Now my brother retired from corporate life. Now he's become an entrepreneur. So now I think our family's kind of where we should be, out there building businesses and impacting lives in our communities.
Yeah, which is great, isn't it? It's just interesting to hear, because I think, so many people think there's like a cookie cutter approach to entrepreneurialism. It's people who've done well in school and then they've, or had parents that were very entrepreneurial, but it's not always the case. Now you almost lost your business. So tell us about after, you left school, and what did you do when you left school? Did you get a job, or did you start business straight away? What happened there?
So, well, actually, it's crazy. I actually got married right out of college, and
that's not so crazy.
For me, it wasn't, but it gave me a son. So I became a single dad when I was 24 years old.
Wow.
And so my first job was actually being a father. And I was actually teaching at the local community college. I wanted to go into academics and be a professor, because there were some classes I found I did really well in, and I really enjoyed the work they were doing and the research around it. But I kind of reached this branch in one of the first, crossroads in life, recognizing that I can't be everything to my son that I wanted to be from a time standpoint, as well as from a monetary standpoint, while pursuing a master's degree and a PhD in academia. And I had to make a difficult decision. And I decided that I needed more flexibility and freedom in my life, almost like a millennial nowadays. I just didn't realize I was an early millennial back in the mid 1990s. And I went into business for myself to actually give me more time for my son, or that was the lie I was telling myself, because it didn't turn out that way. And, had I done maybe better in school, I maybe would have made different decisions. But it's funny, looking back on it, I spent some time working with a gentleman named Vern Harnish. He wrote a book called The Rockefeller Habits. And he talks about that most successful entrepreneurs never even graduated from university. Most successful entrepreneurs, the average grade point average in the United States of a millionaire was about 2.5, which isn't very high. So it's interesting that academic success, or academic, markers such as grade point average and things like that, are not always strong indicators for success as an entrepreneur.
And I think that's interesting, isn't it? Because I think so many people, and that's why I asked you about schooling, because I think school prepares you to be a good employee. And,
it's so funny, because I remember Vern saying in class, this would have been like in the early 2000s, we're at MIT, and Vern says, how many MBAs in the room? And there were nobody in the room had an MBA. There was 80 entrepreneurs from around the globe. Then he pivots the question saying, how many of you have hired MBAs? And a lot of hands shot up, which really went on. It was a huge eye opener for most of us, that the entrepreneurs hire the MBAs, not the other way around.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So tell us about this then. So single dad, decided to start a business. What did you go into talent management, or?
Yeah. So I started a staffing and recruiting business for about $15,000 on a loan from a friend. Cause I had to do it. The drive was there. And the drive really came from this gap inside of me that I needed to fill. I needed to go out into the world to see if I could prove to myself as well as to others that I could actually do this, and that I could start my own business, and that I could make my mark in the business community. Started the company in 1997 for $15,000. Fast forward to 2006, we've been in business for almost 10 years. So I thought I had a lot of it figured out. But what I didn't realize is I was not strong. Going back to the math statement earlier, I was not strong at the financial management of my business at the time. I didn't know the leading economic indicators on my balance sheet or on my profit and loss statement. And that got me into a lot of trouble. Mid 2006, the company got $600,000 in debt. We had a couple of large clients of ours go bankrupt, sticking us with almost $300,000 in debt obligation.
Wow.
Combined with, I was almost out of all my money. I had 60 days of working capital left. So within 2 months, I'm going to be out of all of my money, including losing my house. I had a dysfunctional, toxic culture where my staff wasn't doing what they were doing. I, as the leader, was suffering from massive depression and imposter syndrome because I thought I had to have all the answers for all the people all the time, and I had none of it. And I did a Hail Mary. I threw my hands up, recognized I needed help. I had hit bottom. I hired a coach and walked in September of 2006 after auditing the financials, seeing really where we were, came up with a plan, walked in, fired my entire company, and I started over. Boom. And that was probably the most defining moment of my career, to literally recognize my debt load, recognize my obligations, see how much money I had left, fire the entire company, start over. And within a year, we had turned it around, and we were on the Inc. 5000 as one of America's fastest growing companies for the first of 6 times total.
Wow. Well done, because that's good recovery.
It's a bounce back for sure.
That is a bounce back. To tell me, what was the defining moment? I mean, you mentioned a lot there. There's a lot to digest in that little snippet where you were in a huge amount of debt. A couple of customers went belly up and owed you money. You were suffering from depression, imposter syndrome. I mean, there was a lot going on. What can you say? There was one thing that said, "I've got to change this," or was it somebody said something to you, or did you reach out to somebody? How did that happen?
For me, it was the looking in the mirror moment, recognizing that I don't have the answers, and you know what? It's okay and giving myself that permission to ask for help. I think so many entrepreneurs, at least of that generation, of my generation, were rugged individualists. We thought we had to have all of the answers all the time. It was embarrassing to ask for help and to reach out. And for me, the defining moment was finding the right coach to help me come up with a better strategy for the business, who would teach me to read the financials, who would then walk that path with me through the muck and through the ick of a lot of tough decisions, a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of misery, and who would guide and mentor me as well as coaching me to turn this business around. And it was just it's not like the movies where there was just one defining moment. It was hiring the coach, having the leaning into those massively painful conversations, recognizing that the bottleneck in my business was me. I was avoiding having tough conversations. I was avoiding making tough decisions. I was not showing up in my authentic self, making decisions that I knew were the right decisions, but I didn't want to hurt people's feelings. All of that was just swirling like a giant garbage dump of misery. So that once I was able to clear the room, clear the decks, clear my head, I did go through a period of mourning. Once I got through all that, then I was able to put a different plan in place with the help of the coach, but also with pivoting and coming up with a new strategy for the business.
And so tell us about, so you speak a bit about numbers there and key numbers or key indicators in your number. I mean, there's a lot of people listening to this podcast in business that may not be strong with the numbers. I know it's a weakness of mine. And, how have you overcome that now? Have you decided that you just got to know it, or do you employ or contract great people to help you with that? How do you make sure you're on top of that now?
I do a couple of different things. One, I realized that my job isn't to compile the numbers. My job is to understand the numbers once they're put together. So I've outsourced all of my accounting functions to the same company. I've been with them for almost 15 years. And they manage the business. They provide me with weekly P&L numbers. So now I know every week by Friday, did I win or did I lose? Did we make money or did we lose money? I get cash flow statements. And I learned how to read all of those. So now when I'm working and coaching my clients, I'm not involved in my recruiting business on a day-to-day basis anymore, essentially retired from that company. And now with Extraordinary Advisors, I sit with business owners who have the same problem I had. They don't know how they make money. They just treat it, well, I've got money in the bank account. I can pay my bills and I can write myself a check. What they've done is essentially did what I did. I built myself a job. I didn't build myself a business. Once I learned to read the finances, once I learned to see the levers that could be pulled and adjusted based upon marketplace conditions, that's really when I went from being just an employee to being a CEO.
Yeah, isn't that's a good definition or a good distinction for people to really get their head around? Because I find that how I explain that is working in versus working on. And when you're working on your business, you're making money. When you work in your business, so when you're working in, you earn money. When you're working on, you make money. And I think it's a big difference for entrepreneurs to get their head around. Because what was the change for you though? Like you obviously got in that position where you weren't comfortable having tough conversations, and that's a personality thing.
Oh, for sure.
So how did you change your personality coming into this, into this new era where you've grown a business into to be one of the top 5,000 Inc. businesses in a 12-month period? Like what changed for you?
I had brutal conversations on a daily basis. It was a lot of brutal conversations. I started digesting a lot of business books. I read the Good to Great book from Jim Collins over and over and over again.
Great book, yeah.
Absolutely. I gravitated towards the Stockdale paradox, where they talk about having to recognize where you are and be okay with where you are. Nothing wrong with having a better vision for a better future, but recognize where you are today. For my business, I stopped focusing on the top line. So I was trying to grow it into a $20 million company. That was my goal. That was my BHAG. Because that's what I've been told in the staffing space. If you have a $20 million staffing company, you're quote unquote then successful. I then really started focusing on the margin. By focusing on the margin, then I pivoted to the days outstanding on my receivables, started whittling that back. I'd been out 120 days. I got it down to 14 days. I increased my margin by almost 12%. Move the margin, move the days outstanding. That's how I paid off all the debt, because then once I was able to figure out that sweet spot in the marketplace that was being underserved, I was able to charge more. I was able to get paid quicker. I was able to satisfy my debt obligations. I was able to get the bank off my back. And then I was able to pivot in how I hired people. I used to hire people with a lot of experience in the recruiting space. That worked for a while. What I found worked even better, though, was to hire people for their DNA, not for their resume. I could take somebody who was a great person and teach them to be a great recruiter. I couldn't teach somebody who was a decent recruiter to fit our core values, to fit our culture, to fit the business model we were growing into. So I just started hiring people that I wanted to work around, because it's a tough business. We've got to all dig in together. And in the interviews, I would tell them the story I'm telling you right now about all the dumb decisions I made, all the things I wish I had done differently. So I was authentic, vulnerable, and transparent in the interview. So that shifted the culture so that when we had to have the difficult conversations, there wasn't any surprises.
Yeah, which is important. And did you find that helped you though? Because it was your limitation, I think, by the sounds of things, was being able to have that difficult conversation. I think a lot of people have that problem, Todd, where they're worried about upsetting somebody. And I've seen many business owners hold on to somebody for too long. And so we hear this thing now, hire slow, fire fast, but I still don't see many people that do it,
Well, what I had to figure out was that I carried so much guilt, so much shame, and so much misery before I cleaned house that I just didn't want to suffer like that again. I thought there's got to be a better way. So I came up with the technique that if someone did have to be removed from the team, one, there were KPIs for their activities that they knew on a weekly basis. They knew if they were doing well or not. I knew if they were doing well or not. And because I posted everything publicly, everybody knew if you're doing well. So essentially I kept everything hidden before 2006 and didn't tell anybody how bad things were. Now, it's 2006 going forward, everybody knew where everybody else stood. So if Bob's doing well and Jane's doing well, but Susie's struggling and Susie has to be removed from the team, nobody's surprised. Bob's not surprised. Susie's not surprised. The other part that I found was really helpful was when I did have to terminate someone and fire someone for performance reasons, I was able to do it with a kind and compassionate way that actually freed them up to go do another job they were probably going to do better at. But I learned that employees have just as hard a time sometimes quitting a job as leadership has in letting them go, because there's that cross contamination, that cross collaboration of being codependent. Well, I can't quit because then you'll have an empty spot in your team. Well, I can't fire you because then your family will suffer. By taking all those pink elephants out of the room and just dealing with the brutal facts of performance, it saved me saved me hours of misery and suffering.
And you talked about, you had a toxic culture. What have you done to make sure now that the culture is not toxic? Because obviously that's a big, a team is so important, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I spend a lot of time working with my coaching clients now on getting the right culture in the room and getting the right mindset for the owner. A lot of what we talked about today is having me get my act together so I could get things done in the business. And that happens with nearly every client I've ever worked with over the last 3 years, getting them to figure that out. So to get the mindset wrapped around, for me, I had to really figure out, what did I want? And you think, well, gosh, that's so easy. I want to be rich. I want to be this. I want to be that. Like, when you really get an entrepreneur to be vulnerable, a lot of them say, I want to leave a legacy. I want to make an impact. I want to make a difference. And if I do all that, then I can make great money. And that's so important to get that wrapped around. What business do you want to have? You may be in the computer business or the software business or the manufacturing business, but really, why are you doing it? Take that why, the Simon Sinek why of why you want to do it, mirror that into your culture. Build your culture points with your leadership team. And that's one of the biggest things I found as a coach now is, and I say this to every CEO I go into work with, we start day one. By day 365, I can pretty much guarantee you 20% to 80% of your leadership team is going to turn over because you as the leader have decided to go in a different direction. You as a leader decided to make a change. You as a leader will be different. In fact, I had one client, he didn't believe me. Within 90 days, he lost his entire leadership team and started over. And the crazy thing is, in the year we worked together, he just gave me this awesome testimonial video. In the video, he references that we turned over the leadership team. Also in the video, he references his revenue grew by 70% and his profits grew by a factor of 5 times. And he now loves what he did. What he didn't realize that he had his leadership team snowing him and sending him in the wrong direction, preventing the business as well as the overall leader of the team from growing to their greatest potential.
Yeah, incredible, isn't it, when you think about it? So what would you say? I mean, you went from a business that was, digging a big hole financially, was putting you into a state of depression. Obviously, I would say, I'm going to assume you're working pretty hard as well at that time, because quite often that's what's happening in that type of situation, to being, a business that's in the limelight, getting awards, one of the fastest growing in the Inc. 5000, doing that in the year. What were the key things that you could say, this is what I did that really drove us forward, made us a more successful company?
I think if anybody listening today wants to have 3 strong takeaways, here's what I did that worked best for me. I stopped hiring for resume and I started hiring for DNA. I got great people on my team who matched my culture points. I stopped focusing on competing against the big boys in the room, the Kelly Services, the Manpowers here in the United States. And I focused on, what does my client need? Well, my client had a need for highly skilled manufacturing talent. And I found if I could find them, I could charge them more and I could get paid quicker, which helped me. So I put the needs of the client and I put the needs of the candidate actually before my own needs. And by doing so, I actually created a recipe that got me paid faster, got me focused on the margin, not on the revenue per se. That was a huge defining point. And the biggest thing, though, for me was I stopped being a solopreneur mindset thinker. I started thinking about a global world, and I started thinking about what I wanted and who could help me do it. And that's when I reached out and I hired a coach. So I changed the way I hired. I hired for DNA for resume. I really focused on the margin, not the revenue, and I got help from me as the leader, from somebody. There's one thing to say to my coach, I don't think I'm going to make payroll this week, help me figure this out, versus saying to my employees, hey, you guys, thanks for working really hard this week. I can't pay you. Help me figure this out. It gave me that outlet to talk to somebody who is going to be of service to me.
How did you go about making that decision when you're in that financial stress? Because I know a lot of people listening will say, well, I can't afford to hire a coach. And we hear it all the time.
Sure, sure.
Sometimes I say, well, you can't afford not to hire a coach.
Right.
So how do you get your mind, how do you get your mind around that?
So honestly, the thing I did was I had a conversation with my son at the time, and we're at dinner, and he knew how bad things were. I was honest with him, and his friend's father was a bankruptcy attorney, and my son shared with his friend how bad things were, and his dad said to him, "Well, just tell your dad to file bankruptcy. I mean, it's a legal process. You can go through it. There's no shame. There's no guilt. And that's what the mechanism is to free him up." And we're having this conversation at dinner. And he said, "Dad, why don't you just file bankruptcy?" And I said, "I can't do that. Here's why I can't do it. Because two reasons. One, I tell you to honor all your commitments and obligations to people, including me as your father. If I role model this for you, that when the time gets tough, we bail on people, we quit on people. That's not who we are as Palmers. We're not going to do that." And the second thing is, I said, I've been living within the 6 inches of my ears, and I've not reached out and asked for help. I'm going to do this last thing. I'm going to reach out for help and see if I can find somebody who can help me. And I had one credit card left to my name, and I paid the guy off of that because I realized that I hadn't done everything. So if I had to go to my banker and I had to go to my vendors and tell them I couldn't pay them, I could at least say, I've literally done everything I can possibly think of, including spending my last money on getting a coach and getting help. It's so interesting. I've got a friend of mine who's now become a really well-known actor. And I would talk to him about how could you're a waiter, basically barely paying your rent, yet you keep hiring an acting coach. He's like, because it's the only way I'm going to get better is to get the help I need so I can achieve the dreams I want to have.
Yeah, it's incredible, I think, and it's a mindset thing, isn't it? Like, you've just got to have that mindset. Now, you spoke about the fact that you read some good books. Is that now a part of your ritual? Are you always educating yourself?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things, like someone asked me the other day, like, how do I pick the clients that I work with when I'm coaching them? And I said, well, no different than I used to pick my employees. We've got to have a cultural fit. And part of it, my cultural fit, is my clients have to be lifelong learners. So part of my vetting process, when I talk to somebody on the phone or I meet them at a speech or something, and they say they're interested in working with me, I'll say, tell me the 3 podcasts you listen to on a regular basis, or tell me the last few books you've read, or who's your favorite business author, or do you watch Shark Tank, or all these different things. Because the only way someone can be coachable is if they're a lifelong learner. I've committed to lifelong learning. I do a lot of it continuing ed. I've worked with some of the world's leading mindset people around business and success. And I've had a coach in my life since 2006. I drink the Kool-Aid. Now I work with one of the world's leading neurosurgeons, so I can understand how the entrepreneurial brain works better. I can understand my brain and how it works better, so we can get out of fight and flight and go from scarcity to abundance. So I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. And if I've got somebody who just wants to tell their friends at the country club, hey, I hired a coach, he's going to fix all my problems, I am not the coach for them, because that's not how I operate.
And what's been your most satisfying moment in this process? Is, it sounds like there's been a lot of good times now. What would you say has been defined as your most satisfying moment?
I've had so many great moments. It's really, I've met United States presidents. I've met some really great entrepreneurs. I've been on some awesome programs like yours. But really, I think the most prideful thing I can experience was when my son, who's now an accountant, he's in his mid-20s, had the conversation about how I paid off all the debt to the vendors who took a gamble on me, and to the bank who took a risk on me. And to say to him that conversation we had on our little dinner table, here's how I was able to do that. And just seeing the pride in my son's eyes that his dad is the man of his word, that's the best reward. And the fact of it is, I'm the only one who's going to get to enjoy it because nobody else was there.
Yeah. I think, and isn't it interesting that that's your most satisfying moment, is being, because I think that was very important to you, wasn't it? Being true to yourself. Being true to myself,
being true to my family. And, because the reality is, when I was a younger entrepreneur, I had defined success in, how much money I can make, what can I have, what can I do? And I found that acquiring things and acquiring wealth didn't satisfy my soul. It didn't satisfy the gremlin mindset I had of, be more, you're not enough, be more. What I found is the pivot for me as I got older was redefining success. And success for me now, and I liberally give credit to Tony Robbins. He said one time that success is doing what I want, when I want, with whom I want to do it, as often as I want to go do it. So I can literally be successful taking a walk on the beach with my significant other. I can be successful hanging out with friends, having beverages. I can be successful talking to your audience today, thinking, hey, maybe someone took something out of this conversation today. Wow, what a great use of my time. 99% of the things that now make me feel successful are at little of no cost.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting, like when you first started out, you had this BHAG of building a $20 million company because you probably thought that was going to give you some success.
It's funny. I've got a client who I absolutely adore. He is just a solid human being. And he thought the only way he would have success in his business was to literally double his revenue 100% year over year. And then he could pay himself more and he can have all these different things. And we took a look at his numbers. He shared his financials, took a look at his marketplace. Within less than a year, he was able to pay himself 3 times the amount of money on the same amount of revenue because he learned how to look at the business differently. He learned how to work differently. Instead of killing himself working 80 hours a week, he was working 50 hours a week doing the key pieces of the job that were the most critical to making money. And he shifted his mindset. And I couldn't be more proud of his efforts, because really that's what it comes down to. At the end of the day, we want to have some great things as entrepreneurs. We have great abilities that maybe not everyone else has when it comes to risk tolerance or vision for things. But if we work ourselves into the ground and we lose those key relationships in our lives, we're going to be very wealthy, but we're going to be very lonely.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And besides yourself, is there another company or business that inspires you? Are you inspired by or another entrepreneur?
I'm really inspired by Richard Branson. I love his philosophy. I love the way he goes about his business. I've actually through some friends of mine who spent time with Richard, how he lives his life, and he realizes, especially with his dyslexia, Richard doesn't answer his own emails. He has his assistant dictate that he has his assistant read the email to him. He dictates the response to her, and it gets sent out. He works the most important hours of the day on the most important things. He's outsourced every other part of his business to either other leaders or to other options or other technologies. And he's really trying to live that life of abundance, being the chief evangelist officer of Virgin, not necessarily just the CEO of Virgin.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a great inspiration to many of us, isn't he? Such a good, I think such a good example of true leadership.
Absolutely. And he looks like he's having a heck of a good time.
Yeah, he does, doesn't he? So what do you do in your spare time? What are your hobbies outside of working? Because I know a lot of entrepreneurs love growing their business, but is there something else you love doing?
I'm really learning to love to travel. I've been so fortunate as a speaker. I've spoken in Toronto, Canada. I've spoken in Mexico. I've spoken even as far south as South Africa. And I just, that's so much. I love seeing other cultures, and it makes me really appreciate sometimes the life I have by the people I meet. So I love that. I still play competitive baseball, believe it or not. Baseball, not softball. And it's super fun for me to go do that, because baseball, like business, is a sport based upon failure. If you're successful in baseball, if you fail 7 out of 10 times. Love the business metaphors and the learning I get there. I can have a great game, do my very best, and not have a single hit. And other days I get super lucky and I go 3 for 3. And I think my hidden favorite thing in life is I absolutely adore Mexican food. So
right.
I like when I travel, I always try to find out from the locals like the best Mexican food places to go eat. I love being a foodie and doing those kind of things. So I just, for me, it's really about, how many cool people can I meet? How many cool places can I go? How many cool audiences can I speak in front of? And create all these memories so that when I'm 90 years old, sitting on the back porch, I can just look back on my life saying, wow, I got to meet some really interesting people and impact some lives that I never even would have thought. I mean, a little kid who grew up on a farm would get to do.
Yeah. Very cool, Todd. Very cool. Well done, mate. You've done some great stuff, and sounds like you're on your way to something really, you've created something really special, but you're certainly on your way to even more special things, which is awesome. What, if someone's listening to this, and there's probably people that are listening that are going through tough times right now in their business and they haven't been able to come to terms with it, and be able to make those decisions that are difficult. What's your advice to them?
Realize first and foremost that you're not alone, that you are simply not alone. And I remember the days of feeling alone and the days of, I call it shoulding all over myself. I should be this. I should be that. And recognize that you're not alone, and recognize there is help. There are peer-to-peer groups. There's the Entrepreneurs Organization, EO. There's YPO. There's Vistage for people who are really struggling. There's SCORE, the Society of Retired Executives. People who can help you not only listen to what you're going through, but also help you create plans and strategies. So just, I would say, if you're really struggling, by all means, don't put yourself in such a negative mindset where you think failure is permanent. I can tell you from my experience and a lot of my clients who have setbacks, every step on the path of failure is not really accurate. Every failure you have on that path is nothing more than another step onto your success. If you can recognize that you can have the intention of success and let go of the expectation of how you're going to get there, believe it or not, that freeing up of the neocortex will allow your creativity to blossom without beating yourself up.
Yeah, great advice. Fantastic advice. Now, we're just about out of time, mate, so I'm really mindful of that. But Todd, thanks so much once again for joining us for the Business Brain Food podcast. How can people find out more if they want to get in contact?
Well, Ben, I'm so thankful to be on your program today. I've had such a good time. What I'd like to do is, if anybody who's heard me today, go to my website, extraordinaryadvisors.com. Fill out the contact us session. I'd be happy to connect with you for a free 30-minute conversation to hear what's going on in your life. By all means, anybody literally around the globe who's looking for a speaker to come and talk about some of these topics, I'd love to connect with you because I love to travel. But really, for those entrepreneurs, especially like the people you've just referenced who might really be having a lot of private pain, reach out to me. I've been there. I'm happy to have the conversation with you. No charge, because so many people were there for me in my darkest times. I want to pay it forward that way.
Great stuff. So we'll have links to that website and everything that we've discussed today in the show notes. So you can head across to businessbrainfood.com.au. This is episode 233. Or you can just put Todd Palmer into the search box and this episode will pop up, making it easy for you to find all the links that we've talked about. So if you haven't written them down, don't panic. We'll have those there for you. We'll get our amazing show note writer, Mike, to make sure they're all there for you, make it nice and easy. All right, Todd, well, the only thing left to do, mate, and that's a very generous offer, by the way, so thank you for doing that, is the 60-second scrambles what we've got left, where I'm going to ask you some quick questions. You're going to give me some quick answers. Are you ready for that?
I'll be quick.
All right, here we go. Start the clock ticking. What's your biggest addiction?
Mexican food.
Yeah, I sort of expected it after I asked that question. Favorite movie?
The Dark Knight.
The Dark Knight. Yeah, okay.
Heath Ledger's performance blew me away.
Yeah. Have you got a hidden talent?
I probably don't.
It's that hidden.
It's that hidden. I haven't discovered it yet.
Yeah. What's the strangest thing you've ever eaten?
I had guinea pig in Peru.
Okay, that is strange. How did they cook that up?
It was like, it tasted like duck, and it was greasy, and I had one bite, and one bite was more than enough for an entire lifetime.
I can imagine. What frightens you the most?
What frightens me the most, that I will run out of time on the planet before I'm able to impact as many people as I'd like.
Describe yourself in one word.
I would say one word would be authentic.
And have you got a favorite quote or inspirational quote that you can share with the listeners, just to wrap it up?
I'll go back to Tony Robbins. Success is doing what you want, when you want, as often as you want to do it, with whomever you want to do it with. That is a successful life.
Well, all the best for the future, Todd. Thanks again for coming on the Business Brain Food podcast, buddy.
Ben, it was a pleasure to be here.
All righty. Well, if you've enjoyed that episode, make sure you leave an honest review, a rating in the iTunes app or the Stitcher app or whatever your favorite podcast playing app is. We read them all. We love to get your feedback. And once again, thanks to Todd Palmer for coming and sharing his story with us today on the Business Brain Food podcast. It's always interesting to hear that the journey for most entrepreneurs is not a straightforward one. It is a roller coaster ride, and you are not alone. It's a really key takeaway there. And I think it's so important that if you can be authentic and you can be true to yourself and know that, these challenges are not something that you're alone facing, that you can can find other people that have been through it that are willing to help you get through those. So really important lessons there out of today's chat with Todd, and really enjoyed that chat. And just a reminder that today's podcast is brought to you by maxmyprofit.com.au, and the team at Max My Profit is expanding, and they're looking for people that are business coaches, consultants, or advisors, or people that would like to become one, and to help other business owners build the business that they imagine. So if you think you've got what it takes to be Max My Profit's next business accelerator, head across to maxmyprofit.com.au, click on the About tab, and learn about becoming a business accelerator. All right, well, I've been Ben Futrell. You've been absolutely fantastic for listening into the end of the podcast. Thanks again for joining us, and until next time, have a very profitable day. See ya.
You could be larger than